Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into one of the most famously complex prophecies ever written, the final vision in the book of Daniel.
Our source for this explainer doesn't pull any punches. It admits right up front that this section, which covers chapters 10 through 12, has been a real puzzle for readers for centuries. But it also suggests there's a way to unlock it, not with one key, but with a whole set of them. So what is it that makes this ancient text so difficult to get through? Well, it's not just one thing. It's really a combination of issues that have sort of snowballed over thousands of years.
When you dig into it, you find all these layers that make it tough. The story just jumps between all these different kings without ever telling you who they are. And the way our Bibles are divided up into chapters and verses, sometimes that actually breaks up the original train of thought. Then you throw in some inconsistent translations and tricky Hebrew grammar, and yeah, you've got a recipe for some serious confusion. But here's where it gets really interesting. The first step to cracking this code, according to our source, is to look past all that surface-level chaos and start noticing something very deliberate, the repetition of specific words. Let's dive into this, because this is a cool idea. The argument is that these repeating words aren't just a coincidence. They're intentional clues, like a literary breadcrumb trail that the author left to point us toward the vision's most important themes. Okay, check this out. The Hebrew word for stand shows up exactly 28 times. Now, in this ancient literary world, numbers matter, and 28 is a multiple of 7, which is a huge number for completeness and perfection. So this repetition is constantly hammering home a central question: who's going to rise and who's going to fall? And the pattern just keeps going. The word for king appears 21 times. That's 3 times 7. You can see how it's laser focusing our attention on this conflict between different rulers. So when you actually map out all these keywords, this hidden structure starts to pop out at you. The number of times words about power and rulers and what people truly desire appear. It's not random at all. It's pointing us directly to the prophecy's main message about what kind of kingdoms last and what kind of power really matters. So that brings us to the second key, and this is where things start to build. This one isn't about counting words. It's about recognizing familiar stories playing out again and again. Our source uses this really interesting tool from biblical studies called typology. You've probably heard the saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. Well, that's basically typology. The idea is that earlier events in Israel's history act like templates for understanding what's happening later on. And this is such a powerful idea, right? It suggests the prophecy isn't just pulling random predictions out of thin air. It's explaining the future by using these well-known story templates from the past. So when a new, flawed king rises to power, the story makes you think of the original flawed king, Saul. It's a way of saying, you've seen this movie before. Okay, so this is where those two keys we've talked about, the word repetition and these historical patterns, really come together. They converge in the middle of the vision, which zooms in on the careers of 3 powerful but unnamed figures. The analysis here shows that the prophecy is just so meticulously built around the rise and fall of these 3 kings. And what's really incredible is how their stories play out. It's not just random. Each king's career follows this strikingly parallel 7-part structure, from how they rise to power all the way to their ultimate downfall. So you have to be asking, what's with this reoccurring 7-part structure? Well, it's definitely not a coincidence. According to our source, this points us to the final, and I'd say most profound key to understanding the entire vision. If the repeating keywords are like the bricks, and the historical patterns are like the mortar holding them together, what's the actual architectural blueprint for the whole thing? What's the master story that's being used to frame all this history? So here it is. The source proposes this absolutely fascinating idea that the entire prophecy is basically a story of cosmic decreation and recreation, and it's intentionally designed to mirror the 7-day structure of the creation story from the very first chapter of the Bible. Now, to get this, we have to quickly look at Genesis 1. The analysis reads it as what's called a chiasm. It's this literary structure where ideas are presented and then repeated in reverse order. So here, you see the first 3 days are about forming the world: light, sky, land.
and they perfectly correspond to the next 3 days of filling those exact same spaces. It's this beautiful, highly ordered design. So this 7-step pattern, from new beginnings to a final rest or judgment, it becomes this universal template for telling a story. It's a way of talking about how a world is made, how it gets unmade, and maybe how it can be remade again.
And here is the final reveal, the big payoff. When you take that Genesis template and lay it over the story of the ungodly king, the parallels are just wow. His rise to power is like this dark, twisted mirror of the creation week. He makes a new god on day 1. He sets up his boundaries on day 2. He even plants a fake Garden of Eden on day 6, right before he faces his final judgment on day 7. His story isn't just about a bad king anymore. It's a whole narrative about a failed, arrogant attempt at creation.
So, to wrap it all up, this analysis gives us 3 really specific literary keys to decode Daniel's super difficult final vision. It's a method that really shifts our focus away from just trying to predict the future and instead helps us understand the text's own rich internal logic and its incredible artistry. And really, the biggest takeaway here isn't about proving or disproving whether the prophecy is true. It's about taking a step back and just appreciating the sheer complexity and, frankly, the literary genius of how this thing was put together. It shows us how ancient writers used these amazing patterns of numbers and stories to make sense of their world and its future. In the end, this whole way of reading the text leaves us with a really provocative question. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the best way to understand where we're all going isn't by looking for some kind of crystal ball, but by taking the time to deeply understand the foundational stories and patterns that have been shaping us all along.